I'm delighted to be here tonight, joined by our, by Kirsten Dyck, who will be leading this session. And she has a lot of expertise. And so thank you so much for joining us. Just a little bit about Kirsten. Give me 1 second. So Kirsten Dyck earned her honors Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Music and her Master's in Ethnomusicology from York University in Toronto, Canada, followed by a PhD in American Studies from Washington State University. She holds a TESOL certificate from Coventry House International in Toronto. In 2017, Rutgers University Press published Dr. Dyck's books, Reichsrock, The International Web of White Power and Neo-Nazi Hate Music. She has published research articles on music and genocide in peer-reviewed journals and edited collections. She has also published original poetry and co-authored EFL pedagogical material. She has held fellowships with the Auschwitz Jewish Center, the German American Fulbright Commission, and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. From 2017 to 2019, she served as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer teaching English at Poltava National VG Korolenko Pedagogy University in Poltava, Ukraine. She has also taught history, writing, and EFL at James Madison University in Harrisburg, Virginia, as well as EFL at Nanjing Shaoxuan University in Nanjing, China. Dr. Dyck worked on 3 VELF projects, Virtual English Language Fellow projects, from 2021 to 22. Her Zoom lessons with the Burmese government officials were cut short by Burma's January 2021 military coup, but she completed a 2021 VELF project with St. Louis University in the Philippines later in 2021, and then a spring 2022 project with government officials in Djibouti. During the 2022-23 academic year, she taught applied linguistics at Mariano Marcos State University in Batak, Philippines, and she will return to the Philippines now as she is teaching at Angels University Foundation in Angel City for 22-23 academic year. Her hobbies include playing piano, writing, watching documentary films and videos, listening to audiobooks, weightlifting, cooking, traveling, and playing board games. We are so honored and thrilled to have you, Kirsten. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to her.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, and I will get my PowerPoint started here. Good evening from the extremely sunny Philippines. It is just so hot here. April is like the hottest month of the year in the Philippines, and it feels like the roads are baking your feet when you're walking. So that's a new cultural experience for me. Today's talk obviously is about preparing for the GRE, the Graduate Record Examination, which is a requirement for a lot of graduate study in the US, a lot of graduate programs, but not all of them. So it's first of all important, if you want to study in the US, check and make sure. You don't want to take this test if you don't need to. So make sure that your program actually requires it. Some programs are dropping their requirement for tests like the GRE because of the cost and other factors as well. With that said, I definitely did have to take this. I took my GRE 19 years ago, which is a bit terrifying to realize that I'm actually that old. Oh, I should point out before I get any further here that this is an English language fellow event. Claire is smiling at me. So she may take photos of you to use in our documentation for this event. So by attending this event, you may be photographed. If you don't want to be photographed, obviously you can just keep your camera off, and that's totally fine. If you turn your camera on, we may take pictures, but we will never sell them. They'll just be used for either like brochures for the program, or more likely just to tell the US Embassy that we actually did a webinar. So no pressure, no panic.
One thing, Kirsten, sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt. I just also wanted to mention that this session is being recorded and will be posted on the US Embassy Tokyo YouTube channel. So if for any reason you would like to rewatch this session or previous sessions, I've posted the link in the chat box, so you can go back and rewatch this recording. It will take a few days for it to be uploaded, but you can go ahead and check out the link. Thanks, Kirsten. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So the outline for today is, first of all, I'll talk about basic information about the test, like what is it, how is it scored, what does it mean? And then I'll talk about the 3 sections of the test. There's a writing section, there is an English section, and then there's a math section. And they go in that order. You do the writing section at the beginning, and then English, then math at the end when you take the test. So let's get started with the basic information about this test. What actually is it? It is not an intelligence test. It does not measure how good a student you are. It doesn't matter how good your English is. It just measures how well you take the test. So be aware of that. If you are not happy with your score the first time you take the test, that it is not a reflection of your personal qualities as a human being. It's just a measure of how well you know the test and how prepared you are for this specific test. And some people struggle with that, and some people find it easier. My younger sister has a lot of test anxiety, and she's incredibly good at projects, really smart. But when it comes time to take tests, sometimes she struggles a little bit. And I know I've had a lot of students who are that way too. So nothing embarrassing about having to take the test more than once. That's totally fine. The reason that universities in the US use this test is so that they have a way to directly compare applicants, so that they can tell, this applicant scored better on the math than this applicant, and they know that you were actually doing exactly the same sets of skills. Not all university bachelor's degree programs are equal. Not all high school diplomas are equal. And sometimes people get a lot of their skills actually from outside of their formal academic training. So they want to know, can you handle the basic work that it will take to do a university program? Can you handle it as well as other candidates? The other reason that they use the GRE, though, this is a private testing company, ETS, and they sell your data to universities. So if you tell them that you're interested in studying history, or you're interested in studying computer science, they may sell that information to universities who want to send you advertising materials. I remember as a 17-year-old just getting a giant stack of advertising materials after I took the SAT, which is similar to the GRE, but it's for bachelor's degrees. So yeah, they do want your data. You can decline to participate in some of that data sharing, but just be aware that they are collecting it. It may be to your benefit, but they are collecting your data. And that's the reality of the world that we live in, unfortunately. So that's why universities like it. They can get information about possible students who might be interested in studying in their programs, and then they can compare candidates. So how important are these scores? I know if you come from a country like China or South Korea, those university entrance tests are like all important and they're terrifying, and you get one chance, and that's the only thing that people look at. Not true with the GRE. So if your score is okay, if you're like in the top 50% of test takers and you do pretty well, then your score is not important. It just kind of qualifies you to be considered for the program. Getting a perfect score on the GRE, absolutely top across all three sections, does not guarantee you admission to a graduate program. The GRE is often a very small part of a complete application package. They're really just checking to see that you have basic skills. What they will do is, if your score is not good, if you're in the bottom 50%, and particularly if you're in the bottom 25% of test takers, they may use that to automatically reject your application. If you're applying for a program in engineering, for example, they may not care so much about your English score. If you're applying for a program in English literature, they may not care so much about your math score. They may only care really about the writing and the English. For an English literature degree, they may only really care about the math for an engineering degree. So check with your program to see if they have like a minimum score that you have to qualify for. And if you fall below that, whether you'll be automatically disqualified or whether that's just something that they might consider. So it tends to be a small part of the application package. Low scores can cause some applications to be immediately rejected, especially for really prestigious programs. If they're getting 300 applicants for 5 spots, then yes, you need that GRE score to be good. But if they're getting 10 applicants for 7 spots, the GRE score may not be so important. So you want to focus on your application package, on your essay and things, on reaching out and talking to professors in the program and introducing yourself and asking if you're a fit, asking if they want to work with you. Those kinds of things may actually be much more important than your GRE scores. Having a relationship with someone who is expecting you to be applying and looking for your application in the stack is especially what I would recommend. With that said, let's talk about the GRE, because some programs will require a minimum score. So there are 2 kinds of GRE tests. I'm only going to talk today about the GRE general test. That's the most common for almost all graduate programs. Some programs have GRE subject tests. I believe there's one in chemistry, for example. So you need to check with your program to see if you're taking the general test or if you're taking a more specialized GRE subject test. But it probably will be the general. If they just say you need a GRE score, they're talking about the general test. So unless they tell you that you specifically need like the GRE engineering test or something like that, I would assume that it's the GRE general. So they now have 2 ways to take the test. I learned this was not offered when I was taking the test in 2005. I had to go to a Prometric testing center in 2005. That was the only way to do it. Now there is the option to do the test at home with an online proctor. So someone through your computer is watching you through their webcam. So if you live far away from a Prometric testing center, that may be a good option for you. For people who are testing outside of the US and Canada, most of the Prometric testing centers will tend to be in major cities, especially in the capital city. I just took another ETS test, not the GRE, but the practice test a few weeks ago, and I actually had to go to the capital city to take that test. I had to actually travel into Manila to take it. So if you don't want to go to a testing center, or you can't go to a testing center, it may be a good idea to look at taking the test online from your home. The cost is pretty high. It's $220 US. If you're in most of the world, if you're in India, it's $228. And if you're in China, it's $231.30. And I'm not sure why those countries are more, but the basic fee is $220. If you need to reschedule it, or if you need additional services, like you want to order more score reports to be sent to more than 4 schools, for example, you need various, like, cancellations, things like that, they probably will charge you more money for those extra services. It is free to view your scores online at any time, and you can print your scores on your home printer or save your scores as a PDF, and that is included with the $220. And you can send your scores officially to up to 4 schools every time you take the test. So you can list and you can find the code. It'll be just a number that's associated with your program, and you can list that in your registration. So when you register for the test online, they'll ask who you want to send your official score reports to, and then ETS will automatically send those to 4 schools for free, and then you can pay to send the tests to more than 4 schools if you're applying to more than 4 schools. So just be aware that it is quite expensive. I think when I took it, it was like $75 20 years ago, and suddenly it's like 3 times what it used to be. I was kind of shocked. If you're taking the test at a testing center, the way I did, you will show up at a testing center and they will assign you to a computer. So you will still take it on a computer, no more pencil and paper tests. It's all computer based. You need to arrive 30 minutes before your scheduled test slot, because there are some procedures that you have to do before the test starts. So please be aware, don't show up if your test slot is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't show up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Show up at 12:30. Bring 2 forms of photo ID, ideally your national ID, and probably a passport or a driver's license or something like that. They will give you instructions about which forms of ID are necessary. And just, bring an extra one, bring that second one just in case they reject the first one. You don't want to be rejected and lose your testing slot. So bring 2 forms of ID. They will also have a lot of clothing rules. And I am seeing in the thumbnails, the people who are watching this this webinar. Some of you are Muslim, and I see some hijabs in the pictures. Be aware, you need to contact them and ask a lot of questions. They do not like for you to have your ears covered. They want to be able to see your ears because they're checking to make sure that you don't have any electronic devices in your ears that might help you cheat or might provide you with information. This includes both at home and in the testing center. They will search you. They will search through your clothing. They searched through my clothing quite thoroughly. You can request to be searched by a member of the same gender. So if I wanted to be searched, actually I was searched by a woman. They had both a man and a woman at the center. And I think they just did that automatically, that the woman searched the female test takers and the man searched, but they have a private room so that if you want to be searched in a private room where other people can't see, that's also fine. They are aware that some people have religious reasons, or some people just don't want to take off clothing and empty pockets in front of other people. But they searched, they made me turn out my pockets. I had a hood and they made me turn out my hood. They made me unroll the bottom of my shorts and show that I didn't have any papers in the bottoms of my shorts. They made people take off their shoes and show inside their socks. They are very thorough. So make sure that you follow clothing rules. There are certain types of shoes that you're not allowed to bring into the testing center because people have used them to hide cheating materials in the past. There are certain types of like jewelry that you're not allowed to use because people have used jewelry to hide cameras and to hide recording devices in the past. Follow the clothing rules exactly. Again, you don't want to get rejected from the test and lose your $220. It's a good idea to bring a jacket or a sweatshirt. The centers are usually quite cold. They're air conditioned very heavily. Even in the tropical Philippines, I was very glad to have my sweatshirt. And your belongings, like your bag, your cell phone, will be put into a locker. They'll give you a key and you can lock up your wallet and everything that you brought with you. You are not allowed to take anything with you into that testing center. They will give you paper, scratch paper. They will give you pencils. They will give you a set of headphones, and they will, on the screen, on the computer screen, when you take the test, there is a calculator that's part of the test software program. So you don't need to bring a calculator or paper or pencils. They will provide that. They don't want anything going into that test room other than you and your clothes. It's quite similar if you take the test at home. You need to check in at least 15 minutes early. Show them 2 forms of ID again. And again, they will have those same sets of clothing rules. So pay a lot of attention to the directions for clothing rules. They'll also ask you to have a mirror or to use your smartphone to show them what your computer screen looks like. They're checking to make sure that you don't have any prohibited software programs running. They don't want you to be searching Google. They don't want you to be messaging your brother for information about questions during the exam. So the purpose of that is asking you to show them what your screen looks like, and then you will be asked to turn the smartphone off and put it away. So you're not allowed to access a smartphone during the test, obviously. And you, in this case, provide your own whiteboard and marker, erasable marker, or if you don't have a whiteboard, you can get a plastic sheet protector with a blank piece of white paper inside and use that like a whiteboard, but they will not allow you to use paper and pencil. They will not allow you to use any kind of permanent pen. They don't want people to record test questions. They don't want you sharing your test questions with people after you take the exam. So they will ask you to erase your whiteboard, and they'll ask you to show your erased whiteboard or your erased scratch paper at the end of the test. So follow the directions for that as well. It's not worth it to try to cheat. You'll just lose the $220, and that's a lot of money to lose. Okay, so the test structure. The analytical writing section will ask you to write an essay. It will give you a prompt. This is 30 minutes. You get 30 minutes to read the prompt and write your essay. And that's the part that comes first, because that tends to be the part that requires like the most focus and the most brain power. So they do that first, and then it's out of the way. The next section is the English section, which is called the verbal reasoning section. It's 41 minutes, and they'll ask you 27 questions. The quantitative reasoning section, or the math section, is 47 minutes and 27 questions. So they give you a little more time per question for the math section, and it's a total of 2 hours for the test. This has changed a lot. When I took the test, it was a 4-hour test. I had to write 2 essays. I did 2 English sections and 2 math sections. So just be aware, if you're taking the test this year, this is what the test structure will look like. If you're taking the test 5 years from now, it may not be exactly the same length. It may not be the same structure. They change things and they rearrange things fairly often. So make sure that you are looking at their website and getting the most up-to-date information when you actually go to take the test. I'm giving you the best, most up-to-date information for now, but next year things may change again. So for now, you can be very glad that it's a 2-hour test, not a 4-hour test. That was brutal. The way this is scored, the writing section is scored a little bit differently than the English and the math sections. So the writing section will get a score from 0 to 6. A 0 would be like you did not write anything. If you just left the question blank, that's a 0. If you write a great essay that they think shows that you absolutely can handle graduate school, that's a 6. And then you could get anything on a half-point increment scale between 0 and 6. So a 5.5 or a 5.0, those are also scores that most graduate schools would accept. If you're getting below a 5.0, you should ask your program. Again, if you're studying computer science, they may not care if you got a 4.0 on the analytical writing section, because you're not really doing a lot of writing in a computer science program sometimes. But if you are studying history or English literature and you're getting a 4 on the writing test, that may be more of a problem. So again, you'll need to check with your program. The verbal and the quantitative reasoning sections are scored from 130 to 170 in 1-point increments. So you could get a perfect score of 170. You could get a really quite good score of 162, 163, for example, on either one of the verbal and quantitative scores. Or if you don't do so well, maybe you get like a 140, 142, something like that. Again, check with your program about the minimum scores that you need. This is something, again, the scoring has changed. When I took the test, the analytical writing was the 6-point score, but my verbal and quantitative scores were measured out of 800 instead of 170. So again, when you take the test, check ahead of time what the scale and the scoring will be, because this may change. At the end of your test, there will be a question. It'll ask if you want to accept your score or cancel your score. Please do not cancel your score. Do not cancel your score. There's no benefit. Like, there's nothing good that can come from canceling your score. Even if you feel like you did badly, there's no benefit. You can take the test again, no matter what. You can take the test up to 5 times per year. You do have to pay another $220 every time you take the test. But even if you get a bad score, it's more useful to know your score, to know how you did, and they will give you some information about the types of questions that you answered correctly and incorrectly. So it's much more useful to have that information about what you need to study, even if you don't do so well. If you cancel your test, you just lose that information and that opportunity to figure out what went wrong. Also, people are often quite surprised by their scores. I know when I went to take the praxis test a few weeks ago, I felt like, yeah, I know that there were some questions that I didn't get right. And still at the end of the test, I got a good score, a better score than I was expecting. So even if you're not sure about some questions, accept that score so that you know. Schools will take your highest score and they will just ignore your lower scores. So don't worry that if the school sees that you did badly and then you did better on a second attempt, don't worry about that. The schools are not worried about that. They just want to see that you passed the test once. So they're perfectly happy to ignore a lower score. That's usually the system. So no benefit to canceling your scores. You'll get your scores, your writing scores, about 10 to 15 days after you take the test. You'll get an unofficial verbal score and an unofficial math score on the day of the test. So your score may change just a little bit, 1 or 2 points, but this will generally tell you approximately how well you did. And then you'll get your official score 10 or 15 days after the test, along with your writing score. Obviously, a real person has to read your writing sample, and that's part of the reason why they charge so much money for this test, because they have to pay someone to read and score the writing sample. So that's why the analytical writing cannot be automatically graded, because it is actually being read by 2 people, and they make sure that the 2 people agree about the score that they're giving you before they give you the writing score. Your scores will be automatically sent to you, and they will be automatically sent to the schools that you wrote in your registration packet. And they'll be valid for 5 years. So if you take it now and then you apply to graduate school in 3 years, you can still ask them to resend your scores to other schools. And a lot of schools are just looking for an unofficial GRE score. So even after 5 years, some schools may still accept them. Again, check with your schools. So let's talk about the actual content, the actual questions. The analytical writing section, you'll just get 1 prompt. So this is maybe the most straightforward. You'll get 30 minutes to do this essay, and it'll be a general interest topic that they think anybody can relate to, anybody can respond to. You are not required to have any specific subject matter knowledge. So they're not requiring any background knowledge at all from you. This should be something that can be answered by students in any degree program. They're looking for your writing ability, but also for your critical thinking ability. Can you analyze this prompt and figure out how this relates to your real life? The prompt will be in two parts. There will be some kind of a controversial statement, and then they'll give you some instructions about what they want you to do. There is some really great news, which is that every single possible writing prompt that they might give you on the GRE is actually available for you to read through on their website. You can download a PDF file that you can read through all of the prompts. It's a fairly long PDF document, but you can get an idea of the types of prompts that they're looking for or the things that they assign. Here we go. This is an example. These are two different prompts. So you would only get one of these. But these are two examples of sample prompts, analyze and issue tasks. And you can see each one of these has two paragraphs. There's one sentence, and then there are instructions. So prompt number one, as people rely more and more on technology to solve problems, the ability of humans to think for themselves will surely deteriorate. That's our controversial statement. So this is something that two intelligent, educated, rational, nice people might disagree with and might have a debate about. And then the prompt continues and it gives you these instructions. Write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you disagree or agree or disagree. So that's the first thing that you want to know. Agree or disagree with the statement and explain your reasoning for the position you take. In developing and supporting your position, you should consider ways in which the statement might or might not hold true and explain how these considerations shape your position. So those instructions are really important, and you need to make sure that you answer everything in the instructions. So don't ignore any part of those instructions. You need to give your agreement or disagreement quite often, not always, but quite often. The best answer is I partially agree with some reservations, or like I think this statement is a little bit too strong, or like it's a good idea, but this is a little too much, or something like that. So you can also say that you're in between agreeing and disagreeing. So you also need to make sure that you're really explaining why. And that will often be the difference between an essay that's like a 3 or a 4 and an essay that's a 5 or a 6, is how well you explain why you feel that way, and how you tie in, examples, or how deep your reasoning goes. And then, of course, make sure that you think about ways that the statement might be true for some situations, might not be true for other situations. And the last box that I put in the prompt is around the words will, surely. And you really want to look for words like that are flags in these controversial statements that might give people room to disagree. If you say anything like never, always, definitely will, all or none, those are places where you can look at that and say, well, most of the time this is true, but I can think of an exception, or maybe you can't really know that. So with this prompt, I mean, one of the things that I would say is, if I were answering this prompt, I would say, yes, some people may find that their problem solving ability deteriorates a little bit because of technology. However, over the course of human history, we have seen again and again that people just use technology to innovate, and this has not held true in the past. You know, people who started cooking their food with fire, people who started writing for the first time. I mean, people might have said, oh, you know, this might cause your problem solving to deteriorate back then. Like, people are often afraid of new technology, right? But we've used this and we still have our brains. So I would use some of those historical examples to say, maybe this will deteriorate a little bit in some circumstances, but I can definitely think of times when it hasn't affected our decision-making skills in a bad way. So that's the first prompt. And then the second one here, just to give you another example of what some of these prompts tend to look like. A nation should require all of its students to study the same national curriculum until they enter college. And I put my little red box around the word all, because this is, again, one of those all or nothing words that you can use to find a place, to find exceptions, and to give them an argument that has some detail and some levels to it. The instructions here are quite similar, but a little bit different. So again, you need to make sure that you're really reading the instructions as well as the controversial statement. So the instructions here: write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the recommendation, same thing as the previous one, and explain your reasoning for the position you take. Okay. In developing and supporting your position, describe specific circumstances. So this one is different. Describe specific circumstances or situations in which adopting the recommendation would or would not be advantageous, and explain how these examples shape your position. So here I would be thinking of, yes, okay, for most students, maybe a national curriculum will produce citizens who all have the same knowledge base, except I can think of examples like students with disabilities who might need some kind of special education. I can think of students who are maybe migrants, immigrants, refugees who don't speak the language, who will need some kind of special curriculum. I can think of students in some countries who are like Olympic athletes who might need, if they're training 8 or 10 hours a day, they might need kind of a specialized curriculum in high school. So those are some situations when maybe the national curriculum isn't so great, and also different countries might have different needs. If you have like a very small country that only has 200,000 citizens, then maybe it's easy to have everyone do the national curriculum. If you're someone from like India or China or the US, then you have a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances. So those all or nothing circumstances are things that you want to look for. And again, just make sure that you're kind of flagging all of the main parts of the prompt. Don't get creative here. So if you've learned how to write sort of a basic 4-paragraph essay or 5-paragraph essay, that's what they want. They're looking for a basic essay with a thesis statement. In my experience, usually I only have time to write 2 body paragraphs, not 3. My essays on these tests are usually 4 paragraphs, but you can do it even just with 1 body paragraph. I've seen those be successful too, but it must have introduction, body, conclusion, definitely at least 3 paragraphs. You need to have a thesis statement. You need to have topic sentences, and you need to have an argument that is complete. Be so careful with time, like maximum of 5 minutes to read through the prompt, maybe 5 minutes maximum to outline what you want to say, and then be writing. Just be writing like crazy to finish your argument. And often I find like I'm just kind of hitting enter on the last sentence when my 30 minutes is up on these timed exams. So watch your time so carefully. Just watch the time, complete your draft, and then go back and edit. Think about your grammar and your proofreading after you finish your argument, because they're going to be looking just as much at the quality of your argument as the quality of your English grammar, right? A few grammatical errors, a few punctuation mistakes will not be the end of the world, but an essay that's only 3 sentences long might be, right? So make sure that you answer the prompt fully and that your outline or your plan for what you're going to say addresses all of those little points that they asked for in the prompt. So that's the analytical writing section. After that 30 minutes, we'll move on to the verbal, which is more of a multiple choice sort of selected answer type of text. There are 3 main types of questions on the verbal reasoning section. The first one that you'll see is reading comprehension questions, and these will usually be about half of the questions in the verbal reasoning section will be based on, like, you read a little reading passage and then they'll ask you questions about it. Usually each reading passage will have somewhere 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that are based on that one reading passage. And you might have 2 or 3 of those reading passages on your verbal reasoning section. There are a few types of questions, like different types of reading comprehension questions. So these may be multiple choice questions, and the multiple choice questions may either ask you for one answer, or some of them will tell you to choose all the correct answers, like select all that apply. So be sure that you really read the directions for the question, so that you're making sure that you're getting the correct idea about what to do. And then there are also questions that are called select in passage questions with these reading comprehension questions. And we'll look at question types in a moment. So that's reading comprehension. And then there are 2 other types of questions that are not reading comprehension, the text completion and the sentence equivalence. And we'll look at that in just a second. But here's an example. I'm only going to read one example of a reading passage to you. These do tend to be quite technical. There might be some words that you don't understand. And in my experience, these are extremely boring texts to read. So one of the hardest things for me on these standardized tests is just kind of like staying awake and maintaining my focus through these really boring texts that kind of make me want to fall asleep, honestly. So power through and really think about it. Let me read this to you, and then I'll show you some examples of the different types of reading comprehension questions. So, policymakers must confront the dilemma that fossil fuels continue to be an indispensable source of energy, even though burning them produces atmospheric accumulations of carbon dioxide that increase the likelihood of potentially disastrous global climate change. Currently, technology that would capture carbon dioxide emitted by power plants and sequester it harmlessly underground or undersea instead of releasing it into the atmosphere might double the cost of generating electricity. But because sequestration does not affect the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, delivered prices will rise less by no more than 50%. Research into better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide will undoubtedly lead to lowered costs. So that's our passage. Now, let's have a look at, this is an example of a multiple choice question that will only have one correct answer. You can see at the top, it tells you that. says sample multiple choice question, select one answer choice. Our question is, this passage implies which of the following about the current cost of generating electricity? And at this point, if I'm reading this passage, I'm going, oh no, I have to go back and look at this again. So you'll probably have to go back and look through the reading passage again to find the answer. Our choices are A, it's higher than it would be if better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide were available. B, it is somewhat less than the cost of electricity transmission and distribution. C, it constitutes at most half of the delivered price of electricity. D, it is dwelt on by policymakers to the exclusion of other costs associated with electricity delivery. And E, it's not fully recovered by the prices charged directly to electricity consumers. And if you're anything like me, at the end of that question, you are, like I said, starting to fall asleep. But let's look back. So current cost of generating electricity, we'll look back at the passage. And I see the word currently about 4 lines down. Currently, technology that would capture carbon dioxide emitted by power plants and sequester it harmlessly, et cetera, might double the cost of generating electricity. So currently, the technology might double the cost of generating electricity. They're asking about the current cost of generating electricity. And so the correct answer for this one will be answer C. If the current cost of electricity is, let's go back here. If we might double the price by using sequestration, that means that at most half of the actual price of electricity is just the generation of electricity, right? That's a hard question, right? And there are a lot of tough vocabulary words in there as well. But some of these will ask, you know, this passage implies X, and you have to really look and think about it. They're looking to see if you can handle graduate level professional scientific texts. Here's another question about this same passage. And this is an example of a multiple choice question with 1 or more answer choices. So you can either answer 1, or you can check 2, or you can check all 3, depending on which ones you think are correct. Any or all of these could be correct. So the passage suggests that extensive use of sequestration would over time have which of the following consequences? A, the burning of fossil fuels would eventually cease to produce atmospheric accumulations of carbon dioxide. B, the proportion of the delivered price of electricity due to generation would rise and then decline. Or C, power plants would consume progressively lower quantities of fossil fuels. Normally I would give you some time to think about this, but I know we're running a bit short on time. The correct answer to this one, they don't really talk in this passage so much about fossil fuels. They don't really talk about how much fossil fuel consumption will change. But what they talk about in this passage a lot is the delivered price of electricity. So in this case, even though they say select all that apply, there is actually still only one correct answer, which is B. The proportion of the delivered price of electricity due to generation would rise and then decline. So you can see here, these are pretty tough reading comprehension questions, a lot of them, and you really need to think about it. And some of them may have a lot of vocabulary words that you're not familiar with, and we're not going to panic about that. So here is the last type of reading comprehension question that works a little bit differently. So the question here is select the sentence that explains why an outcome of sequestration that might have been expected would not occur. So why did something that we expect actually not happen in reality? In this type of question, you will actually click directly on the passage. It'll be like each sentence will be its own little link, and if you click on the sentence, it highlights it. So you will click on a sentence in the passage on the screen to answer this question. And in this particular example, we have a sentence toward the end that says, but because sequestration does not affect the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, delivered prices will rise less by no more than 50%. So we thought that the price would rise heavily, but something changed, or there is this extra factor, and so this extra thing didn't happen. So you'll click on the sentence here, and you can see I just underlined the sentence in my PowerPoint, but on the computer screen, you'll actually have the opportunity to click the sentence itself. So those are the three types of multiple choice questions for reading comprehension, or questions for reading comprehension. And these reading comprehension passages, as I said, will probably be about half of the verbal section. And then there will also be, let's see, we're going to look for main idea versus details, questions. Read the questions first. This is a good strategy. And just look for context clues for advanced vocabulary, right? There are also questions after the reading comprehension questions. There are what are called text completion questions, and you'll get several different answers to fill in blanks. There will be one answer per blank, and this is an example here. Let me show you. So we have this passage with 3 blanks in it, and we have example words that we can use to fill in all 3 blanks, and we have to choose the correct words. So here's our passage. It's refreshing to read a book about our planet by an author who does not allow facts to be blank by politics. Well aware of the political disputes about the effects of human activities on climate and biodiversity, this author does not permit them to blank his comprehensive description of what we know about our biosphere. He emphasizes the enormous gaps in our knowledge, the sparseness of our observations, and the blank, calling attention to the many aspects of planetary evolution that must be better understood before we can accurately diagnose the condition of our planet. So what they want you to do here is pick words that go into the blanks that make this whole paragraph work together. So we're not only thinking about the individual sentence, but we're thinking about how the meaning of the whole paragraph works. So in this case, we want the word overshadowed for blank number 1. We want the word obscure for blank number 2, and we want the phrase superficiality of our theories for blank number 3. If you have a question that has only 1 blank in it, then you'll get 5 options instead of 3. But this is sort of like a fill in the blank thing. And then there are text completion strategies, like take time to really understand the passage, read it first before you start to answer, and look for any signal words like however or moreover or unfortunately that might give you an idea about what kind of word you should use. You can try filling in the blanks with your own words and then looking at the options to see if there are any words that are similar to your own words, your own ideas. And that could be a good way to complete these. And then just make sure that your whole sentence or your whole passage makes sense together. And that's really key, is thinking about the whole thing as a paragraph or as a sentence. The final type of verbal questions are called sentence equivalents, where you need to choose 2 options that produce 2 sentences with the same meaning, and you have to get both answers correct. So here's an example. The sentence is, although it does contain some pioneering ideas, one would hardly characterize the work as blank. And so they want you to pick two words that mean similar things or two words that make the sentence mean the similar things. And we want to be really careful here because sometimes they will actually put pairs of synonyms in that are not the correct ones. So in this case, the correct answers are C and F. If I put original into the blank, that works. And if I put innovative into the blank, it means basically the same thing. But the tricky part here is that we also have the words orthodox and conventional, which are kind of the opposite of original and innovative, but they are synonyms. So we're not only looking for synonyms, right? We're looking for the synonyms that mean the right thing to make the sentence make sense. And we have to be careful that we're getting the right ones because eccentric can kind of have some similar meanings to original and innovative, but it doesn't work in this particular sentence. In this particular sentence, it makes the sentence actually mean something different. So you really have to know the nuances of the vocabulary definitions here and really think about them. Okay, so like I said, don't just look for synonyms. Sentences have to mean the same thing. So quickly, I know I'm running short on time, but I want to take you through a few of the math questions or the question types as well. I will warn you, I am not a math expert. This was always where I struggled a little bit more. However, good news, the GRE mostly covers math that is 7th to 9th grade math in American high schools. This is because some people, when they go to university, don't study a lot of math. If you take an English degree, or like me, my bachelor's degree was in music. I did not have to take any math classes. So they're taking you back to that basic math that most adults need to know to be able to be adults in the real world. This shouldn't be crazy difficult math, most of it. They'll be asking you about arithmetic, so basic ideas about numbers. How do you do exponents? How do you estimate numbers? How do you do percentages, ratios, sequences, things like that? There will be some pre-algebra and algebra 1, maybe a little bit of algebra 2, but not too much. There will be some high school geometry questions for sure, and there will be some data analysis questions like basic statistics, basic probability, how to interpret graphs and things like that. There will be, again, 4 question types. There will be multiple choice questions with 1 correct answer, like on the verbal, and then also there will be multiple choice questions with more than 1 possible answer. And then there also will be ones called quantitative comparison, where you're comparing 2 numbers. And there will be ones called numeric entry, which are ones where you type in the number with your computer keypad. And some of them might be grouped together, like you might get a graph or a chart, and then 3 or 4 questions about that graph or chart. So watch out for those question sets that are all about the same set of information. These quantitative comparison questions are asking you, like I said, to compare quantity A and quantity B. So you'll always get the same 4 options. You'll know when you see one of these questions that it's quantitative comparison because it'll always have the same 4 options here. Like this question, quantity A is greater, quantity B is greater, the 2 quantities are equal, or the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. So in this case, they're asking you to look at this geometric diagram of a parallelogram and tell them that either x, which is quantity A, so angle x, or angle y is greater. And in this particular case, good news, you don't have to do any actual calculations because they don't give you any angles. So the relationship cannot be determined without any actual numbers on this. We actually don't know which one of those is greater. You can assume, if you're looking at a diagram like this, If it looks like the line is straight, you can assume that the line is straight. If something looks like a circle, you can assume that it's a circle. They won't try to trick you by making a line look almost straight but not completely straight. So don't worry if you don't have a ruler to measure if something's exactly straight. That's fine. So for quantitative comparisons, if you have to do calculations like with the calculator or on your scratch paper, check your math, check your math, check your math, check your math. Make sure that you entered all the numbers correctly, do it twice. If you have to do calculations with like X and Y and variables, put in actual numbers, like just try it. Stick a 3 in for X and see what happens. Simplify things as much as possible. Often you might not need a calculator for some of the questions, so be aware of that. Here are some examples of multiple choice. Again, some of these will ask for one answer. Some of them may ask for one or more correct answers, and you'll have to get all of the correct answers if it says one or more. So this is another geometry question. The figure above shows a circle with a center C and a radius of 6, diameter of 12. What is the sum of the area of the two shaded regions? So you have to know that pi r squared, so pi times the radius squared, is how you find the volume of a circle. So we have pi 6 squared, or pi times 36 is going to be the total volume of this circle. And they're telling you that angle C, or sorry, the angles in the white section are 160 degrees, and you have to know that a circle is 360 degrees total. So you'll have two angles with 160 degrees. Those two angles add up to 320 degrees. So you have 40 degrees. If you take the total number of degrees, 360, minus those two white angles, 320, you're left with 40 degrees. And 40 degrees is 1/9 of 360. So the correct answer here, we're looking for what is 1/9 of 36, the volume of the circle, and 1/9 of 36 is 4. So the correct answer here is 4 pi, and that's our only correct answer. This next question is an example, and I won't take you through all of the math, but this is an example of a question that has two correct answers. They're asking you for which are possible salaries if we're comparing these, and you just have to know that the possible salary is below a certain amount. So it cannot be any higher than a certain amount. So the only possible ones here are the lowest ones. And here, so we have two possible salaries that are lower than the one that they're asking for. So this is an example of a multiple choice question that has two possible answers. And then, use the fact that the correct answer is among the choices to your advantage. So if you're doing the calculations and you are coming up with an answer, but your answer is not in the list of choices, you know for sure that you're doing the math incorrectly. So make sure that you're getting an answer that is the same answer that's like at least one of the choices, and that can help you. It doesn't guarantee that you've got the right answer, but it's a help. And like I said, not all of these questions will require you to do calculations, like the one with our parallelogram. Like you didn't have to do anything with a calculator because there were no numbers to put in to the calculator. So some of them you don't worry about calculations until you're sure that you actually need to do them. And here's the last type. I promise this is the very last type of questions that we'll talk about: numeric entry questions. these ask you to type an answer. So you'll need to use the keypad on your computer keyboard to type the correct answer. You will not get multiple choice options here. So you'll type in either a whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, -10, whole number, integer, or a decimal, 1.3, 9.27, something like that. And if you use an equivalent form like 2.50 instead of 2.5, that will still be correct. So any equivalent forms of the same number will all be correct. So here's an example. 1 pen costs 25 American cents and 1 marker costs 35 American cents. At those prices, what is the total cost of 18 pens and 100 markers? So 18 divided by 4, 25 cents, right? So that's a quarter of 18. So that would be 4.5, 4.5. And if I have 100 markers, I take 0.35 times 100, so 35. So my correct answer, I think, which should be $39.50. There we go. So you would type into that box, you would use the keypad on your computer to type in 39.50. If you just typed in 39.5, that would also be correct. And here's another one. So if you have a fraction, they will give you 2 different boxes to type in the top number in the fraction, the numerator, and the bottom number in the fraction, the denominator. So this one says rectangle R has a length of 30 and a width of 10, and square S has a length of 5. The perimeter of S is what fraction of the perimeter of R? So I'm finding like how big is the outside of that rectangle, length of 30, 30 times 2 is 60, width of 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 60 plus 20 is 80. And the square has a length of 5, so 5 times 4 sides is 20. So the rectangle has a perimeter of 80, square has a perimeter of 20. And so then all I have to do is 20 divided by 80. And of course, if you put in 20 divided by 80, I think they probably would accept that, but the best answer would be 1/4 or 1/4. So yes, they're saying the correct answer is 20/80 or any equivalent fraction. 2/8 would also be correct. Anything that is equivalent here. So these numeric entry questions are the final type of question. Again, as with all of the math questions, check your math, check your math, check your math, check your calculations, type carefully, make sure you're typing in the right answers after you get them on the calculator, and make sure that you're answering the questions exactly the way they're asked. Watch out for units of measurement like grams versus ounces, meters and feet. Be careful with that. And make sure that you're rounding. If they ask you to round, if you have an answer that's like 9.275 and they just want 1 decimal point, make sure that you're writing 9.3 instead of 9.27 if that's what they're asking for. So just answer, like really look at the questions, read the questions carefully, and make sure that you're answering the questions. And that goes for all through the test. Read the questions carefully, make sure that you're answering the questions as asked, the verbal, the essay, the math, all of them. And then my final piece of advice is stay calm, because often the way that people do badly on the test is by feeling like they got 1 or 2 questions wrong, feeling like they don't know these vocabulary words, and then panicking. And often you actually can figure out a lot from the test if you just keep calm and you breathe and you just push through and like, okay, I didn't know that one. I had to guess on the last one, but maybe I'll know the next one, and not letting your fear of the test or your anxiety take hold of you. So Claire, I'm so sorry. I know I went over time, but that is what I've got. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Wow, that was so much great information. And I think that your final points around making sure to reread, recheck your answers, and staying calm are all really great pieces of advice for those of you who will need to take this test. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we did go over time a little bit, but I hope that this was still very beneficial for you. There are some questions about will the presentation be shared at all? Is that something that you can do, Kirsten? Or can they just go to the video and the recording?
Yeah, so I sent you an earlier version of this PowerPoint, and I can resend the exact one to you for sure. And I know, yes, obviously they can go to the video recording, and you can see here on the screen and in the PowerPoint also, you have my email address in there, kirstendyck@gmail.com. There was a really good question. Okay. In preparation for bright GRE scores, how do you feel the most likely days should be needed when considering two candidates, each of which who has 80 score or 100 over on the TOEFL? So the TOEFL is a different animal. The TOEFL is a different test. And this may or may not be required of you depending on your personal background. So I would say with the TOEFL, again, they are checking to make sure that you have the minimum proficiency to be able to handle the work. So they probably will not be using your TOEFL score to make the decision between two possible students. If they feel like the two students are both able to handle the workload, and this is the same thing with the GRE. Once they feel like, okay, your English level is good enough that you can understand what's happening in classes, that you can do the readings, that you can write the essays. Once you have that minimum level, then your TOEFL score doesn't really matter anymore and your GRE score doesn't really matter anymore. That's when they start looking at the two candidates' essays and the two candidates' CVs or resumes, your experience. That's when they look at what you actually want to research. Because maybe you're a great student, but they don't have any professors who are studying your topic in their department. And so that is a reason why I have gotten rejected from some graduate school programs, was they said, like, your idea for your research sounds awesome and we can't help you with that. And there are better programs for you. So the GRE and the TOEFL are both just a minimum, like making sure that you have the minimum skills to be able to do the coursework. And then the actual decision of whether you are accepted to the program or not depends on everything else that you have to submit. And that's why I said at the beginning that the GRE, if you have an okay score on the GRE, and I would say the same for the TOEFL, then they're not important at all. The only time that you really need to worry about it is if you feel like you have a really low score. But after your score is high enough, then you need to be putting the work into your essays and into your resume and into communicating with the department that you're applying to.
Great. There's another great question about master's degrees for business about the GRE or GMAT. I can answer that quickly.
Yeah.
Basically, you need to double check with the program that you are applying. Some may say that you can do either, but some may have a preference for doing one specifically. For business school, often GMAT, which is a different test, is the one that is required, but please double check with your particular program that you are applying to.
And I would say do the test that you think you can get the better score on. So if you feel like you're doing, but when you take the practice tests, like if you have a choice, take the test that makes you feel more comfortable. So if the GMAT has questions that are easier for you, take that one. If the GRE seems easier for you, take that one. And if you're not sure, and if you have the money and if you have the time, if you're not sure, you can try taking them both and just seeing what happens. There's another question here. How much is the GRE score we must get to be accepted to US university? So unfortunately, I don't have any one number for you. It depends very much on the program that you are applying to. Some programs do not even require the GRE. More and more programs, I would say, are not requiring the GRE. And many programs don't have a fixed minimum score. Many programs are using this just kind of as part of your application. So but like I said, if you're applying to something like mathematics, engineering, computer science, chemistry, they will care much more about your math score. So you need to make sure that your math score is good. And they may not care so much about the verbal reasoning. If your verbal reasoning is kind of weak, if your analytical writing is kind of weak for those hard science programs, that might be fine. And then the opposite is true. If you're doing film studies, if you are doing like history, my programs in ethnomusicology and in American studies, they didn't really care about math. I didn't have to take any math for those degrees, but they definitely wanted to know that I could write an essay. I needed good scores on the essay and on the verbal reasoning. So different programs have different requirements, and you need to ask each program, I'm sorry to say, what their requirement is, or if they require it. Russell Satria asks, is it possible to take the test more than once? Yes. And that's the good news. You can take it up to 5 times per year. And if you want to take it in multiple years, you can take the test as many times as you want. It's expensive, but you can take the test more than once, and schools will take your highest scores on like the test that you performed the best on, and they will ignore any lower scores. They do that quite frequently. I have actually, with not the GRE, but the SAT, the high school SAT, I took it twice. And I did improve my score the second time, and they only looked at my second score and they ignored my first score on the GRE. That's how that works in the US, thankfully. Yeah, it's not a once and done test. Yeah. Good question.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think that's all the time we have. I know we've gone over time, but we really appreciate you sticking with us and for asking all of these great questions. And this session will be posted on the U.S. Embassy YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it there if you would like to do that. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten.